just 10 days, Singaporeans will head to the polls in the most widely contested general election this country has ever seen. How will you exercise your vote? Good evening, I'm Stephen Chia and welcome to Your Vote Matters. I have with me representatives from the ruling People's Action Party and the top 5 opposition parties fielding the most candidates this election. We will be discussing the various hot-button issues facing Singapore today and what the parties have to offer to deal with these challenges. From PAP, we have Lawrence Wong, Minister for Culture, Community and Youth and Second Minister for Communications and Information, and Denise Phua. From the opposition, we have Lim Tian from the National Solidarity Party. Mr. Kenneth Jayaratnam from the Reform Party, Chee Soon Juan from the Singapore Democratic Party, Tan Jee Se from the Singaporeans First Party, and Leon Pereira from the Workers' Party. Now, as the incumbent ruling party, the PAP will get half the allotted time to state its position and plans, while the opposition as a group will get the other half. And there will also be a free-flow discussion. Now, as a moderator, my job is to keep time to ensure that the discussion is on track. And so let's kick things off and start by allowing each candidate to give an opening statement on what is at stake in this election. Lawrence, please.
Thanks very much, Steve. Well, as you said, this is the first time in our history where all 89 seats will be contested. So this election will be an election to choose the government and the leadership team for Singapore and also to set the future direction for all Singaporeans. And it's happening at a critical time in our development because Singapore is at an inflection point. This year we celebrate SG50. We look back and there's much that we can give thanks for. A lot of transformation in Singapore. We've transformed from mud flats to a metropolis. But it's not just the physical infrastructure. It's also about how we have built our nation together. It's about our values of meritocracy, multiracialism, where anyone can strive and excel regardless of background, race or religion. It's about our sense of unity and pride as Singaporeans. And I see this in my own family. My grandparents grew up in a kampong. My grandfather was a fisherman. My grandmother did odd jobs. It was not easy living. I mean, they did hard work, but they lived life with dignity. They took pride in their work. They raised 7 children, and they had the chance to see their children and their grandchildren enjoy a better life than what they had. And I'm sure this applies not just to me, but many Singaporeans, including many of the opposition candidates here today, would have similar stories to share. Singapore today is at a higher point than in 1965. Our lives have improved, our community bonds have strengthened. But there are still fundamentals that remain the same. We are still a little red dot. We still have to earn a living through our own efforts and hard work. And we still face many challenges. The economic environment around us, we've seen financial markets gyrating. There may be a real impact on the economy, regional volatilities, and including security threats. So going for the next phase of our development is not going to be easier. In fact, it may well be more difficult than our first 50 years. And to move forward, we should look back at what we had done in the last 50 years, what were the key success factors. And I believe one of the most important success factors is the partnership between the PAP and the people. So in this election, we, the PAP, will present our report card to the people and also our plans to the people. And we hope Singaporeans will vote for the PAP and give us a strong mandate to strengthen the partnership between the PAP and the people so that we can continue to set the direction for Singapore's future, not just for the next 5 years, but for many decades well beyond SG50.
Okay, thank you, Lawrence. Lim Tian, your turn next.
Steve, thank you very much for inviting us to this forum. This election really is about whether Singaporeans deserve better from their government. The PAP has distilled the principle of government down to one phrase: profit at all cost. Are Singaporeans happy with this approach? No, they are not. They want a higher standard of living, but not a higher cost of living. And in the last 4 years, the standard of living certainly has not improved. They want their government to do more to help that Singaporean keep his job than to help that foreigner find a job. They want their government to help that Singaporean mother and father to put their own child through university rather than to help that foreign family put their child through our university. They want our government to keep its promise to return their CPF personal life savings, which is a promise that this government has broken.
All right, Lim Chien, thank you. Your time is up. Kenneth, it's your turn next. Your time begins now.
Yeah. Why are the PAP calling this election a year early? What's the reason that PAP are cashing in on the sympathy vote in SG50? It's because they know that their policies have failed. They have failed to raise our living standards. They have no idea of what to do next. They are hoping that this sympathy vote will work for them. But in fact, they only have a simple model, bringing in more workers, generating economic growth, and they're not sharing that with Singaporeans. We are seeing the increasing population depressing our real wages, and the benefits of that not being shared. A 30 billion Reform Party wants to see that is shared with Singaporeans.
All right, Kenneth, thank you. Sun Chuan, your turn next.
I think that Singaporeans are beyond the question of whether they want to see more opposition in Parliament or not. I think they overwhelmingly indicate that they want to see more opposition in Parliament. The question, I think, Singaporeans repeatedly have indicated to us is what kind of an opposition that they want in Parliament. And repeatedly they've told us they want to see more constructive and more competent opposition. And that's why the SDP in the last few years have worked so hard to come up with a set of comprehensive policies on areas in housing, on education, on population, and all this can be read on our website, ursdp.org. We do this for one reason, because we want Singaporeans to vote, give Singaporeans a reason to vote, not just vote for the SDP, I beg your pardon, to vote for the SDP, not just against the PAP.
Thank you. Jise, it's your turn.
Thanks, Steve. This election is about Singaporeans' jobs, their rightful place in their own country, their families, and their self-esteem. Singaporeans are unhappy. They work the longest hours, but their wages have stagnated. The stress level is high. The fundamental cause is the huge influx of foreign workers. This is the direct result of the government's immigration policy, which has divided Singaporeans by pitting citizens against their employers and citizens. This huge influx of foreign workers has broken up families, taken away jobs and space from Singaporeans, and shattered their self-esteem. Our party has a socio-economic policy to help Singaporeans cope, a safety net for poor and struggling middle-class families, and a social investment program to provide jobs.
Sorry, your time is up, Jise. Leon, I'd like to hear from you.
I'd like to start by thanking the members of the PAP who are here for the PAP's contributions to Singapore. And thank you to the other parties as well. Since the 2011 elections, the government has made major and good policy shifts and U-turns, such as MediShield Life, the Silver Support Package, and huge state funding into our buses and trains. This is not to the credit of the Workers' Party, but thanks to the confidence of Singaporeans to vote for change. The Workers' Party's 9 MPs in Parliament supported these changes when they moved in the right direction, even when we felt that they did not go far enough. We were not obstructionist. In this election, the choice is whether we want to empower Singaporeans to drive the country in the direction that we as a people want to go. The WP's GE 2015 manifesto has over 130 policy recommendations for fostering economic security and institutional reform, so as to build confidence among Singaporeans, the confidence to take risks in career choices, to start a business, to innovate, and to express their political aspirations.
All right, thank you, Leon. And Denise, your comment.
First, I want to thank the Workers' Party for recognizing the People's Action Party's achievements in terms of pioneer generation packages, workfare, and so forth. So thank you very much. But this election is about presenting the report card, not just of the PAP, but also the other political parties in Parliament, outside Parliament. And it's also about electing a government. For the first time since independence, 89 seats are being contested. There's no by-election effect, and we are all going into this election electing a government. And if we elect a government that is not ready nor equipped to run the country, then I think we are in trouble. This election is also about securing Singapore's future and asking Singapore to come and share the vision and come and realize the vision that we have, the party has with Singaporeans. We want to enable every Singaporean to maximize their potential, regardless of where their starting points in life are. We want to equip them, we want to invest them, think about the skills future, for example. We want to make sure that, the definition of success is no more just academics, but really wherever we are in life, regardless of where we come from, where we study, we can be equipped, we can deepen our skills, we can master our skills, and we can be considered not obsolete, ever not obsolete, and be relevant. We want to make sure that no one will be left behind. We want to stretch further the social safety net. We want to enable that those who are in need, those who are vulnerable, those who are disabled, will always have a chance and a place in Singapore. We want to make sure that the basics that are done quite well will be done even better in terms of housing, transport, healthcare, and so forth. So that's what this election is about for the People's Action Party. And the work is not done. There's unfinished work. And we invite all Singaporeans, let us come and build a stronger Singapore with you, for you, and for our beloved country.
Thank you, Denise. All right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you all for sharing and giving us your opening remarks. I'm sure you have a lot more to say, and we will do that in a short while. But it is time for us to take off for a short break now. And when we return, the candidates will be tackling the top 3 questions sent in by viewers over the last few days. So do stay with us. We'll be back shortly. Welcome back. Now, over the past 5 days, we've received many emails from Singaporeans on the issues that matter to you. Now, the questions were wide-ranging. We have curated the list, and these are the top 3 issues: the rising cost of living, foreigners and jobs, and the future of Singapore's politics. Now, for this next segment, each of you will take turns to answer the questions within the allotted time, and then we will have a free-flow discussion, which means anyone can speak after that. Now, the first topic has to do with the rising cost of living. Many of our viewers wrote in to express their concern with the rising cost of living. Issues such as healthcare, housing were among them. What is your party's plan to keep the cost of living manageable for the man in the street? Lim Tian, I'm going to start with you, and your time begins now.
Steve, this is probably one of the most critical issues in this election. Now, we in the NSP recognize the huge inequality gap in Singapore. It is one of the highest in the world, and we have unveiled a policy to allow every Singapore family that does not live in a private property to purchase a HDB apartment at cost plus, and also another apartment in the resale market.
All right, thank you, Lim Tian. Kenneth, your turn next.
Yeah, well, it's not really a matter of rising cost of living. It's the fact that wages are not keeping up with inflation. And the reason for that, again, is back to the government's population policies, their open-door policy to depress Singaporeans' wages, the fact that productivity has stagnated. Reform Party wants a cap on the number of foreign workers to be adjusted in line with economic conditions. We want a minimum wage as well.
Thank you, Kenneth. Sujwan, your turn.
The problem with the rising cost of living, the very high escalation of the cost of living, is this continued bringing in of the super rich into Singapore. And I think that's really pushing up housing prices and then of cars. And then when you get more cars on the road, ERP rates go up. So these are some of the things that we can do to ensure that the cost of living continues to be held at an affordable level.
Okay, thank you. And Jise?
Yeah, the rising cost of living is due mainly to government policy measures in housing, transport, and education. It has very little to do with imported inflation as in the past. In fact, commodity prices have come down. Oil price is now around $40 to $50, less than half of what it used to be a few years ago. And yet, petrol prices have risen. And that is because the government has taken advantage of this situation to levy the tax, increase the duty on petrol.
All right, thank you, GC. Sorry, your time is up. And Leon?
Since 2000, rail wages have not grown by as much as in previous decades. More can be done to keep incomes growing faster than costs and to provide for the security of older Singaporeans in retirement. In our manifesto, the Workers' Party has put forward policy recommendations in inflation protecting, the CPF life and silver support payments, lowering BTO flat prices, introducing unemployment insurance, and managing land supply to keep industrial and commercial rental growth at or close to inflation.
Thank you, Leon. Lawrence, Denise?
I think the role of government is to ensure that all Singaporeans have access to what I call basic essential services like healthcare, housing, schools, transport. And I think the party has tried very hard to make sure that everyone owns a home. I think more than 80% of Singaporeans own their homes. And healthcare, we've recently also just implemented what I'm really supportive of, the MediShield Life, so that whatever conditions you are in, whatever age you are in, you can have universal healthcare coverage. And that really is very important for peace of mind for people who fall ill. And I think Heng Swee Keat has been trying to make every school a good school so that, everyone has access to good quality school, regardless of your starting point in life. And transport as well, I think there are quite a lot of concession schemes for the disabled, for the elderly. And that's one way by which the party is trying to also make sure that the cost of living is maintained. Are we perfect yet? No. I think we have some more to do. But we really want to make sure that these basic services are affordable and accessible to all Singaporeans.
I would just add that, if you look at rail wages, several people, I think GC and a few others, said that wages have stagnated. But rail wages have in fact increased, in both nominal terms and in real terms. Perhaps not as fast as before, but they have increased. And that's factual. We can do a check. That's one point I would like to clarify. The second point is, as Denise has mentioned, we continue to do our best to keep essential services affordable, be it housing, education, all the other areas. Right? So if you look at food, for example, hawker centres is iconic in Singapore.
Social enterprises.
We are the only city in the world with hawker centres that have become so iconic, and we are building more hawker centres. Education is heavily subsidised, and now we are doing more by expanding it into preschool education, kindergarten, childcare. If you look at electricity price, for example, GC talked about oil prices. Electricity price today is lower than it was in 2010. Lower than it was in 2010. And on top of that, families are getting more U-Save rebates than before. So, in fact, the government is doing more, and we will want to continue to do more, addressing all the different issues that have been highlighted and the concerns of Singaporeans with regard to cost of living. We are open to new ideas, but on ideas like, say, the minimum wage, I think we just have to be careful, because if it's done incorrectly, it can lead to more unemployment and more worse outcomes for Singaporeans.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. Now, we have 4 minutes of free-flow discussion. Anyone can speak at any time. I'm just going to get the ball rolling, because Denise, you touched on MediShield Life, and we did have a viewer write in. Annie Yo, a retiree, wrote in to ask about the high deductibles, and she hopes that healthcare remains low and affordable. So she's asking, how can the government help to ensure this is so?
And maybe Lawrence can help me, but our approach has always been to give targeted assistance. And if you look at the premiums, I think for those who are very old, the pioneer generation, for instance, they pay very little. And also those who are, I think those who are even not so old, but also considered elderly, they also get support. And I believe that those who are in lower housing types, they also get more support. So I think it's the purpose of government to make sure that this is affordable. And why start a policy like this, a program like this, and make sure that people cannot access it? And there's some compulsory premium support as well.
That's right. So MediShield Life should be seen in context with MediSave. So MediShield Life protects the hospital bills, but MediSave is there for other expenses as well. And the government is topping up into the MediSave accounts of Singaporeans, and as Denise said, keeping the premiums of MediShield Life affordable.
Can I take Lawrence up on this saying that real wages have risen? Because maybe he's looking at gross wages, but he's not looking, maybe Singaporeans are probably working longer hours. If you look at household incomes, perhaps the number of dependents has dropped. There are more new citizens. with higher wages than Singaporeans were earning before. So I don't think it's, and also I think you're mismeasuring the retail inflation because you weren't properly taking account of housing price inflation over the last 20 years. So, you know, talking to people on the ground, they certainly don't feel that their real wages have risen.
Well, and I think one of those causes is that, I mentioned a little while ago, but us allowing all the super rich in. But on the other end, we import low-wage PMETs coming up and artificially depressing wages. Now this double whammy is what's giving, well, you have escalation of cost of living and the suppression of wages. It's what is making life very difficult for Singaporeans.
Well, Soon Juan, I think there are jobs in Singapore that you may consider low-wage PMETs, but there are jobs in the service industries like nursing, like the homes, the construction, for example, where many Singaporeans shun those jobs and they do not want to. And in fact, a lot of businesses or even homes are feeling the impact of the tightening that we already are currently doing.
Then how do you account for the fact that Singaporean workers, I think it was this recent survey by Randstad Group, that showed that Singaporeans are the unhappiest and the most stressed out workers in Asia. That must count for something. So let's not talk about things in hypothetical terms, but let's really look at how Singaporeans are feeling. And I think the well-being is at stake right here. And if we're going to talk about the population issue, it's got to be pegged at how Singaporeans, the quality of life, their well-being. And I think that's got to be the measure of how we indicate our population.
Yeah, if you're talking about...
Hang on, we'll just Lawrence respond.
I fully agree with Soon Juan that well-being of Singaporeans are the utmost importance. That's the case for the PAP government and the PAP. And if you look at happiness surveys, I mean, you can't be selective. There are a whole range of happiness surveys. So there are surveys that also show that Singaporeans are indeed happy and they are satisfied. So don't just look at the ones that show unhappiness. So that's one point on surveys. It's a mixed picture. Certainly we can improve workplace environment and we have policies to do that. We continue to try very hard to manage foreign inflows. We are tightening foreign inflows.
I'm sorry, time is up. We finished a free flow session here. We're moving on to our second topic. The second topic is, what is your party's stand on foreign labour needed for Singapore's economy? Do we need them? And how many is enough? What are the factors that will determine that limit? So I'm going to go around, get 30 seconds response first before we open up the discussion. So Lim Tian, you're first. Your time starts now.
Well, the NSP believes that Singaporeans must have priority in the job sector. There must be quotas, strict quotas, imposed on foreign PMETs. No doubt about that. We have the most educated taxi drivers in the world. And why are they in that position today? It is a sad fact of life. They have been displaced. They have been retrenched by foreign labor.
All right. Sorry, your time is up.
Yeah. Kenneth? As Lin Tian was saying, there are plenty of older Singaporeans, once past 40, who cannot get a job because of the influx of cheap foreign labor. Singaporeans are at a disadvantage. The fair consideration framework, which the PAP vaunt, is riddled with so many holes that it's useless. We basically have a situation. The Reform Party wants a cap, a quota, which will be adjusted in line with economic conditions.
Kenneth,
and
your time is up. Soon Juan?
You know, in our policy paper, the population policy paper, we've proposed a talent track scheme whereby foreigners wishing to seek employment in Singapore are rated on a point system, very much like what the Australian government and the Canadian governments are doing. Why can't we have that? If they know how to protect their own and take care of their own peoples, why can't we do that here in Singapore?
All right, thank you. And we'll move on to Jise.
We are not against foreigners in Singapore. We welcome them, they are important, but we want a level playing field. And we don't want employers just to get foreign workers because they are cheaper. We want a minimum wage so that they are not, foreigners are not employed at the expense of Singaporeans. And at a higher level, we do not want this special category of S-passes, which allows foreigners to bring in semi-skilled workers and undercut our professional class, our PMETs.
All right, thank you. Sorry, GC, run out of time. And Leon?
The Workers' Party is not an anti-foreigner party. However, in our population white paper, which we presented in Parliament, we argued for not growing the foreigner population, keeping it stable at approximately 1.6 million, if we achieve 1% growth in the resident labour force. The facts have shown that this is achievable. Our resident labour force has grown at well over 1% in 2014. In our manifesto, we also advocate for compulsory education credential assessment for S and E-Pass applicants to validate the authenticity of their credentials for level playing field.
Thank you. Denise, Lawrence?
Well, you know, foreigners and population, immigration, it's a very emotive issue, not just in Singapore, everywhere in the world. And we understand this. Whatever we do, from the PAP point of view and the government point of view, we do it with the best interests of Singaporeans at heart. We want to make sure that our immigration policies benefit Singaporeans. That's why we are doing this. We are already tightening the inflows of foreign labour significantly. And in fact, the population growth over the past decade is at its lowest. So this is drastic, significant reduction. We are not going all the way, as some have proposed. I think the Workers' Party in Parliament have proposed 0 increase in foreign population, foreign workforce growth, 0% increase. That would be a huge jam brake on the economy. It would be harmful. It would be dangerous. I think it will cause Singapore businesses to suffer, Singaporeans to get out of jobs. But we are calibrating and finding a balance very carefully.
I think it'd be suicidal for any government or any political party to say that Singaporean is not core and to work out policies and programs to ensure that Singaporeans are not core. And really everything we do, may not get it right, but we always do it with the Singapore interest at heart, even when jobs were created then. And in fact, I know that the MOM, for example, is going after companies who have what we call the double weak in the Singapore core and also weak in terms of commitment to employ Singaporeans. So these things are happening. And I think throughout the world, there may not be many countries who really look at how doing so much for, trying to do a lot more for the PMETs. You know, there are job banks, there's career portals, the Skills Future, for example. Investments are made to make sure that people have money to make sure that they can be trained in deepening their skills and they can learn whichever age they are at, regardless of their backgrounds.
Okay, thank you all. We're going to come to the free flow discussion now for 4 minutes. So we're going to continue on this topic. And again, I'll share a comment or a question, a thought from a viewer who wrote in. Richard Tan says that while Singaporeans understand that we have to welcome foreigners in an open economy, how can we ensure that Singaporeans remain at the core of our workforce, which is just what we were talking about? And what is your party's take on this? So I'm going to turn to this side first. Anyone want to jump in first?
Well, I think the emphasis should really be on getting our women who are in their 30s and 50s and older Singaporeans back into the workforce through targeted matching schemes, incentives, and really focusing very, very hard on that. And if you look at the results in 2014, the data in 2014 shows that the resident labour force has actually grown by about 46,000, that's citizens and PRs. So if you look at what is needed to generate economic growth and keep economic growth on track, we need to grow the resident labour force. And we are actually doing that right now, so it is achievable to keep the foreign population stable.
Can I say something?
Yes, please.
I think the work that's done by unionists like the ex-speaker and when she was in union, Halima Yaakob, has a lot to do with the current increase in the female workforce. And also I think much has been done. You know, I'm active in special needs. We also have quite a lot done in terms of trying to promote employment opportunities right from schooling, for example, to now to adulthood, to ensure that these what we call non-traditional workforce are being tapped on, and that actually there's quite a lot of strategies that's being done. These strategies take time to, I guess, to be felt. They take time to be thought through, but they are happening in terms of the women's workforce and the special needs workforce, for example. And even the elderly, the senior workforce. If they want to work.
I don't think Singaporeans necessarily begrudge new immigrants coming in. They understand that we're a nation of immigrants. What I think that they are very unhappy about is this lack of planning for infrastructure, right? You had Mr. George Yeo coming in and saying that, look, maybe we need a master plan. after years of having let in hundreds and thousands of foreign workers. And then you see the breakdowns of the MRT system and you know, the riot in Little India. They are very concerned about that. And then we hear different numbers coming up. Mr. Goh Chok Tong said 4 million was good. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew then said 5.3 to 5.5 million. And then we hear 6.5 million. And Mr. Ma Bao Tan comes up and tells us 6.5 million. Now, where do you get these numbers from? I think Singaporeans are very worried that the PAP hasn't done its homework in this area.
There is a backdrop. There's a backdrop for an aging workforce that's rapidly aging, and it will reduce the workforce. There's also a backdrop that we have a shrinking population, that there's not enough, we don't replace ourselves fast enough, you know. And so these are all contexts, and there are jobs that, as I've mentioned, that are shunned and that are necessarily done in Singapore. And so these are some of the dimensions that need to be tweaked. Even the Workers' Party didn't get it right when they presented in Parliament.
Yes, can I just jump in here? What is your answer to those Singaporeans who have been displaced by foreigners? You say that the PAP have been putting in safeguards. What is your answer to these people?
I think for quite a number of years, and Lawrence, you help me out, you know, we have been, the Manpower Ministry, we have actually invested quite a lot of money in terms of manpower development, especially over the last few years. You look at the portals, career portals, these are things that are not done. I came from human resource, and these are things that are not done in many countries. And so a lot of investment have been put to ensure that our people are skilled, that jobs are created, you know, for them, not just for the current economy, but for jobs of the future as well.
Well, the short answer, Lim Kian, is that it's a significant investment in lifelong learning and skills upgrading, and also helping professionals to get jobs. This is happening already, and now the new initiative that has been put in place is Skills Future. A significant push, as Denise said.
I'm sorry, Lawrence, but our time is up. I'm sorry, folks, but we are done with this topic. We have to move on. I just want to remind the folks at home now, as the incumbent ruling party, the PAP will get half the allotted time to share their point of view, while the opposition group will get the other half, just in case of those of you who are just joining us at home now. Let's move on to our third issue, which is about the future of Singapore's politics. Now, you're all here contesting to win, and even if you win all the seats contested for, none of the opposition parties will form the government. So what is your party or your parties hoping to do with the parliamentary seats that you have? And Lim Tian, again, I'm going to start with you. Your time begins now.
The NSP wants to provide that robust voice in Parliament, which we believe is lacking at the moment. I was interested to hear the Emeritus Senior Minister say the other day that the PAP could be a self-check by itself. That, to me, is total nonsense. And I think Singaporeans know better. Now, we do not believe we have that robust debate in Parliament now.
Sorry, Lim Tian, your time is up. Kenneth, we're moving on to you.
Yeah, we are going to push for accountability and transparency from this government. For years, we've been asking questions. We've received no answers about the government's finances and discrepancies. Well, the dodging is going to stop when we get into Parliament. This government has a $30 billion surplus per annum. Why is it not sharing part of that with the citizens?
All right, thank you, Kenneth. Sujat?
The SDP wants to see the level of politics become more mature. Let's dispense with the name-calling, the character assassination of politics of old. We've got to become just a little bit more sophisticated when we're talking about issues and focus on some of these problems that Singaporeans are very concerned with.
All right, thank you. Jise.
Well, today's nomination has shown that the opposition parties can work together. They are quite united, and they have responded to the people's need, the voice for a united voice against the government. And I think it augurs well for politics of Singapore that we may eventually form a multi-party coalition government coming out of this. And I'm quite optimistic that politics has matured, and we will each party going to Parliament with our own parliamentary seat, fighting for our own policies in unison for the good of Singapore.
Thank you, Jise. And Leon?
Singapore has seen a more responsive politics, a politics more representative of the political character of Singapore since 2011. To preserve and extend this politics, we need to entrench a responsible opposition, one that does not oppose for the sake of opposing, but supports the government when it does well and puts forward constructive criticism where there is room for improvement. In our manifesto, the Workers' Party calls for institutional reforms, such as placing the People's Association under the President and making it politically neutral, fixed terms for Parliament, an independent electoral boundary review process, and an independent electoral commission.
For your time is up. Turn to the PAP. How does your party relate to the limited opposition in Parliament?
Well, Steve, in terms of politics for the future politics in Singapore, I think what matters is not opposition for opposition's sake. It's not about the number of opposition MPs, but it's about selecting the best people in Parliament to represent Singapore and to lead Singapore. And the best people can come from the PAP, it can come from another party, but Singaporeans will have to decide who are the best people to represent them. And the best people are not, I think we look at qualities like competence, capability, but it's also about character. And character means having integrity, having honesty to keep politics in Singapore clean and corruption-free. Integrity and honesty also means being able to not gloss over tough issues, being upfront with Singaporeans and the electorate when it comes to difficult trade-offs that have to be made for the country, and not look at politically expedient solutions that may be harmful to Singapore's interests in the long term. And I think character, if there are people who indeed fall short, then it is our duty to highlight this to Singaporeans. And I want to mention one point. I know Dr. Chi, Sun Juan will prefer me not to dwell on this, but I think it's on public record. You know, I remember what happened in 1996, because I was just starting work in the civil service. Dr. Chi made written and oral representations to a select committee in Parliament, and eventually the committee found that the data presented was false, and he was charged for lying, misleading the public, and later also found to be in contempt of Parliament. This morning I read what Sun Juan said about wanting to move forward and move to pursue constructive politics, and I'm very happy and encouraged to read that. But I think he still owes an account to the public for what happened. And because after so long, I don't believe Sun Juan has sort of explained what happened in the past or apologized for what happened.
I think let me then address that.
Okay, sorry, I will give you a moment to respond, but we'll kickstart the free-flow discussion because it is related. We'll continue on that. And it is also related to some of the comments from our viewers who wrote in. Lai Miao Chu did ask whether it's the ability or integrity of MPs that is important. So related to that issue, I'll let you get the ball rolling first.
Sure, I think that's a very important issue that we had raised at that time. It was on medical subsidies, healthcare subsidies. And we are still the only party that actually held the government to account. Don't forget, at that time, Minister of Health was George Yeo, and he had repeatedly apologized for some of the things that the government had gotten wrong then. So that's hugely important. I just want to caution Lawrence Wong for not making, just to cherry pick some of the things that have come out of that select committee. And don't forget, in that, during those days, there was no social media, and that the situation was very different from now, and it was very difficult for us to get our word out. So I do want you at least not to be partisan right now on this issue here.
So why are we voting MPs?
Can I respond?
Yes, okay.
I don't want to be partisan, so I'm just stating what is on public record. And as I said, the public record shows that the Select Committee had found Dr. Chi and several others in the SDP.
But also, let's not pretend that the Select Committee was just a body
gentlemen,
of
I'm sorry, but this, I think this is not an issue that we want to look at other issues. This is something else that I think you can discuss perhaps in private later on. But on a bigger picture scale also, people are asking, do we vote for the party's policy, or are we voting for the individual, the MPs, to run on local issues? Which do you think that voters should be out there choosing? How would you position
Can I
yourself?
just start off on that discussion? I think when you vote for an MP, you are voting for your voice in Parliament. On the 11th of September, you are not voting for an estate manager, you are voting for a member of Parliament. In the last 4 years, in the last sitting of Parliament, we had PAP MPs who didn't speak a single word. Now, does that qualify them to be a member of Parliament? I don't think so.
Yeah, exactly. When you are voting, MPs are to speak on national issues. They're not there to be estate managers. Of course, the people can trust us that we will be able to run the estates, but that is not, and in fact, there's a conflict of interest.
But does it have to be one or the other?
Steve, I think it's important for both. People should vote based on who their MPs are, and also which party they come from, the track record they're in. Because there's this African saying that says, if you want to travel fast, then go alone. But if you want to travel far, then you need to go together as a team. So I think both are important. The MP himself, himself or herself, represents the needs and the voice of the people he or she represents, but also the party, the philosophy, the fundamental values, the vision, where we're taking the country. I think that's really important as well. So I think both factors are important.
I'd like to, if I may, just ask a question to the PAP. I congratulate you on your manifesto. It's a very professional manifesto, but I did notice that the emphasis appears to be more on a report card of what the PAP has done in the past and some broad directional thrust for what you intend to do in the future, but not many specific commitments for what the government will do in the next 5-year term. Our manifesto has 130 specific policy recommendations, very, very specific, but that seems to be lacking in the PAP manifesto. That seems to suggest that you want the electorate to give you a blank check, blind faith that you will do the right thing. So I just wanted to know what your comment is on that.
You know, Leon, the issue is not about the policy specifics. You know, policy design is always very complex. It's not so straightforward. In any policy, there will be winners and there will be losers. In any policy. So designing a policy is not a simple matter of saying, look, I see other countries doing this and let's have it in Singapore. We set up broad strategies, but within these broad strategies, we are always looking at how best to design the policies.
Look at the GRC and SMC plans. Well, there are many of them, many details.
I'm sorry, folks, but time is up. Time is up for this
But
session.
I haven't the chance to answer your question.
Yeah, I'm afraid you had to jump in during those 4 minutes there. So our time is up. It is structured, and we've had a very lively discussion. We thank you for that, but we do need to take off for a short break. So do stay with us, or we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back. Now, just before the break, we've heard the candidates discuss the issues that matter to Singaporeans, and now we would like to invite them to give their closing remarks. So let's start with the PAP and with Denise.
We are a small country, remain a small country. Resources are limited. We face internal challenges. We have aging population. We have our populace is educated. We need to balance the needs, and the expectations are high. We need to be able to balance the needs of all Singaporeans. We face external threats, terrorism. We face global, regional, economic weak outlooks. And these are things that we need to do. And I believe that the PAP's report card is not perfect, but he has presented the best report card from what I see out of all the political parties in modern Singapore. And this is a party that has what I call 3 A's. It's a party that focuses on action, not just talking, making eloquent speeches, writing manifestos only. You know, it has delivered over the last 5 years, over the last 50 years. It's a party of action. It's a party of ability as well. It has shown that it can run more than just one town council, several town councils, but more than that, entire country. And also it's a party that listens and wants to address the aspiration of Singaporean. The aspirations where, you know, we heard you, we want to build this with you, we want to build a Singapore based on our Singapore conversations, you know, a Singapore where nobody is left behind. And we are there to help maximize everybody's potential, regardless of where we come from and where our starting points are. So I would like to ask Singapore to vote for the People's Action Party for these 3 A's: our action, our ability, and our desire to share and to build that country, to address your aspiration, to build that strong, beloved country with you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Denise. And Lim Tian, over to you.
Steve, in 10 days' time, Singaporeans go to the polls. They are in control, and their decision will determine whether this country comes together or comes apart. Their decision will determine whether our elderly will have the opportunity to retire in this country, or they have to retire in a foreign country because they cannot afford to live in Singapore. Their decision will determine whether our young will have a better future than their parents or a lesser future. And we ask them to exercise their great moral responsibility to change the direction of this country, which is going in the wrong direction quickly. And we ask them to vote for the National Solidarity Party and vote for us because Singaporeans deserve better.
Thank you. Thank you, Lim Tian. Kenneth, over to you.
Yeah, it's not going to save the PAP by dwelling on past glories, Their policies have failed. They have failed to make Singaporeans richer. They have no answers. Reform Party have said that we want the fruits of growth to be shared with Singaporeans. We want a old age pension, child benefit paid to mothers. These things are easily affordable on the government's own figures. Why can't the government, can't it return CPF at 55? These are the things that we will be seeking answers to. We want to see we want answers from the government on these issues, and we want a better Singapore for Singaporeans.
Thank you, Kenneth. Sunja?
You know, the SDP wants a people happy and healthy, not an island overcrowded and stressful. We want affordable housing, not flats where we take an entire lifetime to pay off. We want retirees to live in security and dignity with all their CPF savings, hard-earned CPF savings returned. There are ways, means, ideas that we can come up to help resolve these problems. But this is where it takes a competent, a constructive opposition to do that in Parliament, and we're looking to get the votes of Singaporeans and to support us in this next 9 days.
All right, thank you, Sunja. And over to you, Jise.
An election is about the future, not about the past. But the PAP has been talking about the past 50 years, not about the future. And it has mixed up the past 50 years. The first 40 years were good, relatively good, but the last 10 years were very bad. It started with the Prime Minister in 2004 approving a casino to come to Singapore and bringing in 1 million workers over 10 years. And Singapore's international rankings have fallen. You look at the latest Global Cronyism Index by The Economist, which has put Singapore at top 5 in the world in global cronyism. And cronyism is defined as businessmen who are politically connected are most likely to prosper. And this is happening in Singapore. Number 5 in the world, after Hong Kong, number 1, Russia, Malaysia and Ukraine, and Singapore is number 5. All this talk of meritocracy is just nonsense.
Jise, I'm sorry, your time is up. And Leon.
There are those who would focus on town council issues in this election. Let me say that although some in the PAP felt that Aljunied would become a slum, and in spite of all the obstacles placed in its way, Aljunied is rated on a par with PAP town councils for cleanliness, lifts and maintenance. This election is not just about town councils, but it's about the quality of our lives, our incomes keeping up with costs, our public transport, our security in retirement. The decade before 2011 saw changes that many felt took Singapore in the wrong direction. The population grew rapidly without sufficient infrastructure to support it. Many suffered. Things have improved since 2011. The PAP, however, has asked for a higher vote share in this election and has sent veteran PAP MPs to retake Aljunied and Punggol East. The Workers' Party humbly seeks the support of Singaporeans to move forward with a more responsive, representative politics, a politics that will ensure that we and our children will always be the ones charting the direction of the country we love.
All right. Thank you, Leon. And Lawrence.
Well, Steve, the stakes are high in this election. It's an election about the past, present and future. It's not just about the past alone. We have to look at the past because I think it reflects our track record and report card. And I hope Singaporeans will look at that, not for the PAP alone, but also scrutinize the report card of all the parties and decide which is the best person and best party to serve them in government and in leadership. On the PAP's part, we are proud of our track record. We are proud of our track record that has started since 1959, before Singapore's independence. We've walked this journey with Singaporeans, building our nation together. And we continue to change and improve and fine-tune policies all the time. It did not start only in 2011. Some people want to claim credit for the changes in policies, but the policy changes did not start in 2011 only. It's always a continuous process adjusting policies based on different circumstances, based on changing needs, and making sure that whatever we do it in the best interest of Singaporeans and for Singapore, not just in the short term, but in the long term. And we have many platforms for which we can do this by directly engaging with Singaporeans. We get feedback from them regularly. We serve in our constituencies. We meet residents all the time, almost every day. We get feedback from them through direct contact with our residents. We have platforms like Reach and the Singapore Conversation, which allows for active participation from Singaporeans to again help us fine-tune and improve policies. And this is what we have been doing. It's easy to say, take out CPF at 55, but how do we plan for retirement adequacy as life expectancy goes up? It's easy to say, let's have minimum wage, but how do we ensure that we do not end up with perverse outcomes like unemployment, youth unemployment, which we have seen in many other countries? So we are always trying to calibrate, balance, making sure that we get policies right for Singaporeans, and we have been doing this. Look at workfare, for example. Workfare didn't start only recently. It started after the '97 Asian financial crisis, when we were already seeing income inequalities increasing. '97, income inequalities increasing. We introduced workfare in 2003, initially as a bonus, or maybe 2004, initially as a bonus. And then over time, we enlarged the quantum of workfare, we institutionalized it, we made it a permanent scheme, and today it's an entrenched part of our social safety net, together with other features like progressive wage model, together with things that we have done on the CPF side like silver support. So this is what our election is about. It's about us taking Singapore to a new phase of development beyond SG50. It will get harder. Many people are watching us, what the outcome of the election will be. And, you know, people say Singapore has had a good run for 50 years. How long more will it last? And people are saying that in the international community, domestically, the business community is saying that. So how can we have a good outcome? We hope in the PAP that we can continue to get a mandate from Singaporeans, because we promise to work with Singaporeans for you and for Singapore.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you. Well, folks, thank you all so much for coming in tonight, but we have run out of time. A big thank you to all my guests for being here this evening. We've had some pretty interesting discussions, which will definitely give voters some food for thought over the next 10 days. And come 11 September, it will all be in your hands, the voters, to decide the direction of Singapore's future. To those of you who want a recap of tonight's discussion, you can catch it online. It's at toggle.sg/SGVotes2015. Also at channelnewsasia.com/SGVotes2015. Thank you all so much for your company. Good night.